This is Nice Work. I'm Kate Young.
And I'm Tyler Lake.
So Tyler, a big part of what we do here, our job essentially, is we interview people.
That is correct.
Tell me about your training as a professional interviewer, Tyler.
Well, thanks for putting me on the spot, but I have to admit, I have no formal interviewing training.
No worries. Neither do I.
Not sure that is exactly comforting, Kate.
Well, this week, Alex talks to a famous public media show host, Jesse Thorn of Bullseye, about just this very thing. How do we learn to talk to people in ways that are interesting for other people to listen to?
Hey, maybe we can learn a thing or two.
I hope so. Plus, we learn about a new local literary magazine.
And you tell us about an outstanding MFA thesis show you saw this spring at the Grunwald Gallery.
Yes, and we get a preview of the upcoming show from Jewish Theater Bloomington.
Wow, that's a lot. Let's get to it.
After this.
This is Nice Work. I'm Alex Chambers. I don't know how many teenagers were watching Charlie Rose in the 90s, but I was one of those three. If you're not familiar, Charlie Rose had an interview show that ran on PBS from 1991 to 2017. Like Terry Gross on public radio, who I also listened to semi-religiously, Rose interviewed all kinds of famous people: directors, comedians, politicians, writers. The interviews were filmed around a small table. No frills, just really interesting conversations with creative people whose ranks I wanted to join. But even more than that, I dreamed of getting to do what Charlie Rose and Terry Gross did: conduct the conversations, ask the questions that would get the most interesting reflections on how people approached their work, hear answers that would help us understand what really motivated the work, and then appreciate it on another level. Somehow, decades later, I managed to get a job doing that very thing. I also started teaching classes in podcasting where I got to think with students about what makes a good interview. Around that same time, a more famous interviewer than me decided to call up a bunch of other interviewers, including Terry Gross, and interviewed them about interviewing. His name is Jesse Thorn, and the podcast that came out of it is The Turnaround. If you're interested in what makes an interview work, I highly recommend it. In the fall of 2025, WFIU started airing Jesse Thorn's flagship show, Bullseye, and I had the chance to talk with him about what he's learned from doing interviews for over 25 years and from talking with other great interviewers like Audie Cornish, who was, at the time, a host of All Things Considered, and Mark Maron, Ira Glass, and Larry King. So, here we go. My interview about interviewing with Jesse Thorn. I'll preface this by saying I loved The Turnaround.
Oh, thank you.
Just really enjoyed it. I've assigned the Anna Sale conversation multiple times to my students. I've heard it now like many times. Her baby, the sound of her baby on the mic is very familiar to my ears. Probably more than yours.
I'm grateful to hear that you haven't just come to resent me because I did something wrong when I was talking to Audie Cornish.
That's one thing about NPR News. Like, NPR News never fails to do a good job.
I love how you say that so dismissively.
No, but I mean, that's a really special thing.
I mean,
that
they do a good
consistency of
job at
execution.
the news. Like, what? It's the news. I think sometimes I never watch 60 Minutes or, some news show in the evening and go, oh, I really wish this was more like Saturday Night Live. Like, they're not the same thing. You don't bite into an apple and ask why it doesn't, taste like a banana. And I think you're listening to it and your wife is listening to it because, you want to be informed and then you want to go about your day. Is that, a bad bar to set for people to, make sure they're informed?
No, I'm not against any of this.
Do you also need to know about the baseball loving
I
as
don't
well?
know
That
exactly
was
what I
amazing.
did. But
I was going to comment on that one, too. There were some moments there.
yeah. My favorite one,
Okay.
Alex, Larry King.
Larry King.
Larry King.
The less I know, the better. Now, that sounds strange to people. Like, if you wrote a book, I wouldn't read the book before I interviewed you because I would then know too much about the book. And I'm in the same boat as the audience. They haven't read the book. So we're all in this together.
That's the one that, changed my life.
Did it really? Was it
And he was a ridiculous man. I mean, I say that with immense affection.
How did it change your life? Was it how much he flies by the seat of his pants kind of thing?
It was so, the idea of the turnaround, right, was that I never went to J school.
Right.
I never had a mentor even.
Right.
I worked a little bit on a show called West Coast Live that had a wonderful host named Sedge Thompson, who was very nice to me. But, he also would just appear 30 seconds before the show was supposed to start and then disappear immediately afterwards. So like, I barely know him. But for those reasons, my idea was like, oh, I could just ask people, are my like, completely autodidactic techniques appropriate, But the thing that surprised me about what I actually learned about it was, because I was not making any money from the show and had no plan to make any money from the show and have 75 other jobs, I decided that outside of booking the show, I would not prepare for the interviews. Which normally I prepare, but I was like, I can't spend a day prepping for every one of these interviews. Like, it just doesn't make sense. So like the most that I prepped for one of those interviews was, maybe like for someone whose work I genuinely was unfamiliar with. Like, I don't watch morning news. So I knew Katie Couric by reputation mostly, but like wanted to see some of her interviews, But in general, I was like, I got to draw a line and only prep the barest minimum, because otherwise my life will be out of control. And what I learned from that was how essential being present and responding in the moment was in that conversation. And the fact that ignorance can be an ally, or at least awareness of one's ignorance. And no one was more aware of their ignorance than Larry King. So like Larry King, like I went to his house. Me and one of our producers went to his house. We like got welcomed by his Hollywood assistant into his giant ante room with a grand piano in it. And then we went into his den that was like the walls were lined with trophies and pictures of him with presidents and baseball Hall of Famers. Like where like the coffee table was piled high with trophies. Like you couldn't put anything anywhere because there was too many trophies. And then he came in and, he was like 80 something.
Yeah.
But he was also bragging about the human growth hormone that he was on. And immediately was like locked eyes with me and was 10,000% there with me.
Wow.
Like sometimes Larry King was a celebrity in addition to being a journalist. And like sometimes a celebrity like that, they are practiced at being pleasant and are probably pleasant people, but like the requirements of celebrity are such that sometimes they just have to be in a defensive mode, like a mode where they are enacting their pleasantness. I would say an example of that from someone who I believe to be almost certainly a genuinely super pleasant human being is Tom Hanks. Like I interviewed Tom Hanks once, and I was interviewing a movie star, and it felt like I was interviewing a movie star the whole time. He could not have been more pleasant. It was a lot of work to surprise him with anything.
Right.
And, break through his shell. Not because he was being a jerk or something. It was just, he gets interviewed all day, every day,
Yeah.
Larry King, the opposite. Right there with me. Hi, Jesse. So nice to meet you. Blah, 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 And the thing that he said to me that really made an impact on me was essentially an argument for the fact that not knowing what the answer is what you want. Like, to some extent, I started doing my show live. I did my show live for a long time. And so I was always like interviewing to time. And and even after I stopped doing it live, I was still interviewing to time just because I didn't have any money to hire an editor. And I had a full-time job, so I could only do so much editing myself. But like when you're live on the air and you're interviewing to time, you kind of have to know what you're going to get when you ask a question so that you can plan out that block of time and make sure that nothing goes wrong. And so you really have to calculate your risks. But the argument that Larry King made to me essentially is that if you're not actually wondering what the answer is, what's the point of asking the question? And if you're wondering what the answer is, probably your audience is wondering what the answer is. And the example that I will never let out of my mind that blew my mind was him as saying the best question he ever asked or something along those lines was he asking an airplane pilot when he took off if he knew he was going to land. And you're like, this is a question that makes Larry King sound dumb. But Larry King does not care because it is an interesting question that we all want to know the answer to.
We do.
And you don't have to sound dumb to do that. I mean, like when I listen to Terry Gross interview people, I'm struck by the same thing, which is, there are topics on Fresh Air about which I know 10,000 times more than Terry Gross does, even though Terry Gross is the most prepared human being on earth, right? Like when Terry Gross talks to Questlove, I spent my formative years on Questlove's internet message board. I know everything about the Roots and the Soulquarians, and, I could tell you more about Bilal than she knows about rap music, But she is not afraid of her own ignorance. And she does not pretend to know things that she does not know. And so she prepares in order to find out what she wonders about, but she's not afraid to wonder about things. And I know for me, as like an over-preparer and as a person who is afraid to look dumb, that was a lesson that I had to learn actively. And so that was a lesson that was taught to me by, the man on television who is least afraid to look dumb, or was least afraid to look dumb since we lost him. But like, it's not like I'm like, I'm going to go back and watch old episodes of Larry King Live. But the stuff that he learned doing 6-hour overnight shifts in a diner where he just interviewed whoever wandered up to him.
Amazing.
Is really, really valuable. And it reinforced for me the sort of corollary lesson that I learned doing that show, which was tying one hand behind my back, preparation-wise, meant that I had to be really engaged with whoever was sitting in front of me. And I had to not be afraid to look dumb. I mean, the people that email me that are mad at me because I looked dumb when I talked to Audie Cornish, a super genius, I am like, yeah, well, that's what the point of the show was. That's what the show was about, me looking dumb. I am dumb. I never went to journalism school. I've never worked in a newsroom.
Right.
I don't know anything about reporting the news.
I know. Yeah. I can certainly relate to that. I did a PhD and then got hired to teach this podcasting class to students who had to take journalism classes to take the podcasting class. And I was like, I've never taken this journalism classes. You guys know more than I do.
The closest I ever came to going to journalism school was I couldn't get a job out of college. I graduated from college and just could not get a job. And I'm talking about any kind of job. Like I was applying for radio jobs, but like I was applying for, barista jobs and not getting them. And it got really desperate. I mean, I was like living at my mom's house, but I did not have, and I would like get the occasional like, I need somebody to babysit kind of job that paid for my food, but I was penniless. And in that experience, I was like, okay, I give up. My dad is a disabled veteran, so I get free tuition in school. So I'm going to go to graduate school. And like, because I know I could get like, it was like $600 a month in vets benefits if I went to graduate school. I'm just going to go to graduate school. So I signed up for broadcasting school at San Francisco State because I lived in San Francisco. And I was in graduate school for like 3 weeks because I like went to the orientation and was like getting ready to sign up for classes. And I had to go meet an advisor to sign up for class. I went to the advisor, and the advisor was like, okay, so you're going to need to take all these journalism and broadcasting prereqs in order to get this graduate degree. And I was like, well, I have an award-winning radio show. Does that count? And they were like, nope. And I was like, okay, I can't take a year and a half of broadcasting classes in order to start my master's degree. So that's as close as I've ever gotten to taking a class in broadcasting.
Wow. Yeah, that's great until the turnaround, I guess, which was...
Exactly.
What's changed for you as an interviewer since the beginning of The Sound of Young America? 25 years.
I mean, 25 years ago, I was terrified to fill time. Uh-huh. That was the scariest part of the show. I was there with my friends Jordan and Gene, who co-hosted the show with me for the first 4 or 5 years. And they were the funniest guys I knew. But even with the three of us in a room, and even, we were doing improv on stage at the time. But even given all of that, the prospect of filling the time ourselves was terrifying. And so interviews were a way to fill the time, A. Oh. And then B, it was this constant desperation of, as soon as this guest stops talking, I'm going to have to say something because we're on the air live, And so it was a real trial by fire in that sense. And we would be in the studio. The guest would almost always be on the phone because we were in Santa Cruz and nobody was ever in Santa Cruz. And so we would be in the studio, the three of us sitting around the broadcast console. And just every once in a while a guest was talking, one of us would like raise our hand and it was like, phew, oh, he's got something to ask. So that terror is one of the big things. I think, and the absence of that terror, right?
Like that's
at
gone
some
away.
point, this would be maybe 10 years ago or 12 years ago. I was in therapy. My old therapist, Dr. Carr. Shout out to Dr. Carr. And I was describing to him all this anxiety I would feel before an interview for Bullseye. And he would say, well, what are you anxious about? And I'm like, well, I admire these people and their work, and there's a lot of people listening, and I feel like, what if I make a fool of myself, and what if I do a bad job? All these things, right? Just normal, what if I do a bad job type stuff. And then he was one of these therapists that only ask you questions instead of telling you stuff. And you're like, you can just tell me stuff, but it's fine. So he asked me the question. He's like, so you're afraid of it going badly? And I was like, yes. And he says, well, does it ever go badly? And I was like, no, I guess not. And so that like really left me feeling, I mean, I still have to convince myself of it, to be clear, but it left me in a way unlocked. Like it gave me the feeling, it's okay. You've done this a lot. If something goes horribly wrong, you can edit it out. And these people are there because they want to be there. I haven't had to browbeat anyone into coming, Like it's not like where people are beating down our doors, but everyone has agreed to be there, Nobody's getting like a burlap sack lifted off of their head and then they're like, oh, great, now I have to do an NPR interview? Okay. They're pulled out of an unmarked van. So
the worst experience ever.
Exactly. So like that, convincing myself of that was a big relief for me, and in some ways gave me permission, or I gave myself permission to see what happens. And
like in that Larry King sort of way too.
Exactly. And to be less controlling, more open-hearted, more curious, and just know that if I approach people with a sincere sense of curiosity and wonder, they will generally respond in kind. Like they will match that.
Do you think the interviews themselves got better, or were you just more able to enjoy them?
I absolutely think the interviews got better. I think that the centrality of actually caring what the person has to say, actually paying attention, actually being curious about it, can't be overstated. And those are things that you can get into when you are open-hearted in that conversation. And there are things that are difficult to access if you think your job is to control that conversation. And, sometimes you got to hit the post or whatever.
Sure.
The intro of Don't Fear the Reaper has started, and when the vocals start, and you got to say, sometimes you got to give traffic on the twos. But still, that feeling of like actually meeting someone's gaze, giving a care what they have to say, being genuinely curious about it, noting your own curiosities and expressing them, and not feeling like you have to seem smart and clever is really essential to getting something out of somebody that's worth listening to. And if you actually give a care, people can tell.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
If you care what they have to say, people can tell. People want to talk about the things that they care about.
Yeah.
And if they work on something all the time, they care about it.
Right.
Even if it's just because it makes them mad. Even if they like work at Wendy's and they hate Dave Thomas, like it is important to them.
That's a good point.
One of the things that I learned from the This American Life comic book, which I really recommend to your students.
Oh yeah,
it costs like
we've
$5.
It's great.
That was my only textbook that I've ever had. That came out when I was in college. But like one of the things is people are always most interesting when they're talking about the things they're most interested in. So if you can ask somebody about the things they're most interested in, and you can ask them from a perspective of a person who's not familiar with those things, and you are a proxy for your audience, well, you're going to get great stuff.
Exactly.
You know, you can ask a scientist whether they've ever blown anything up. You know, they'll tell you. That's probably a good answer either way.
Either way, yeah.
Ask Jane Goodall if chimpanzees are embarrassed when they poop. Right? Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Either way.
We got to know.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are forms of interview that are less about the person and more about exposition.
Right.
You know, if I'm interviewing a scientist about a thing they discovered, part of my job is to provide the structure for them to express that thing that they discovered, you know, for news purposes.
Right.
My interviews are generally about human beings who are doing something creative, and there is not that scientists aren't human beings, but the creative act is about who you are in your heart, you know, so it's essential for me to like be there. But the honest truth is that at the end of the day, the best question might be, have you ever made anything explode? You know, like we all want to know if scientists are out there exploding stuff.
I've been, interviewing for a little while now, and I've got a co-host who hasn't been doing it for as long. And he was listening to some of my interviews and like, you really managed to get like life out of people and really engage well and all that. Like you get laughter. And I was like, I think there's an element of, at least the way I sometimes approach it, of wanting to charm people. Like there's a flirtation to it almost. And I don't know if everyone approaches it that way. And so I'm sort of just curious to just hear your thoughts on that.
One of the experiences that I think was most central to my growth on air was that, I did The Sound of Young America, which was the earlier form of Bullseye, for 5 years on college radio. But then I had moved home to San Francisco from Santa Cruz, where I went to college. So, a couple hours away. And I moved from my college radio station to the now defunct KUSP in Santa Cruz, which was an NPR station. And the big difference in my life there was that KUSP had a board operator. And so I could just send them my show. I didn't have to be there in case the emergency alert system went off. And that meant that I didn't have to drive back and forth to Santa Cruz. And so I sold my car and I bought a telephone hybrid, the machine that connects a mixing board to a telephone line, and a microphone, very possibly, they all look exactly the same, but it's very possible that the one I'm talking into right now is the one that I bought because I still have it. We got like 6 of them now, but one of them is the one that I bought 20 some years ago. And I bought like a mic arm and started making the show in my apartment. And when I moved to Los Angeles a few years later, I started often doing the interviews in person in my apartment because I didn't have a staff of any kind. I was on a fair number of stations at that point with Public Radio International, but I had no staff or anything. And I couldn't afford studios elsewhere to put people in to connect to them. So they just had to come to my apartment in Koreatown. And it was a 1-bedroom apartment. So like part of the experience of talking to people was going down to the front door of my apartment building, shaking hands with them, bringing them upstairs, offering them something to drink, sitting them down. And it is a different thing to be a guest in someone's home than it is to be on the other side of a telephone line doing a satellite tour, right?
Yeah.
And eventually my wife had a baby and we had this intern who kept running into things and going, ow, and waking up the baby. And so my wife was like, you have to get an office, Jesse. And I was scared that I would lose that. I was scared that I would lose the feeling of people, meeting my dog. But what I found was that I could, to some extent, create that feeling through the tone with which I welcome people onto my show. Even if they were in a studio 3,000 miles away, which they are sometimes. So I do view my guests as guests and want to have a human relationship with them. The other piece of it is having met, we just did 25 interviews in a row last night.
Oh my God.
For our 25th anniversary. And everybody was somebody I booked by emailing them simply because of the logistics of booking 25 people. We were like, only people that Jesse has their email address are we going to even try and book, no publicists. And so most of the people were people that I know in real life, many of them that I met through my work. And like sitting with those people, Bob Odenkirk or Rob Hubel or Lisa Loeb or whoever it is, I was like, oh, these are people that I talked to like they were people. These are people whose work I admired more than anything. You know what I mean? And the fact that Bob Odenkirk, Mr. Show changed my life. And I learned by talking to hundreds of people like that they are all just people.
Yeah. Right.
Like they may be particularly talented, but there's no like special thing about a talented person that makes them a non-person. And there are like, if you get really famous, there are like burdens that come with that really stink that you have to deal with, and you might deal with them by building certain defenses or whatever. But even Tom Cruise is a human being, And so there is like a respect that goes with talking to someone and realizing that they're not like a tool for you or an abstract idea, but actually just like a person. So that is something that I do try and keep in mind. And I think like to some extent at this point, innately keep in mind, which is when I'm talking to somebody, that's somebody, that's like that could be my uncle or my nephew or, my sister,
Right. It's not like Tom Hanks in quotation marks with capital letters. It's
exactly. And like, I've almost never had like a negative interaction with somebody on the air, but like if somebody is guarded in the way that Tom Hanks was, or if somebody is just guarded in their life. I mean, John Cena, I interviewed not that long ago. And like John Cena is a obsessive, compulsive worker. You don't get to be a giant muscle man unless you're fat. And like a really brilliant, fascinating man, but like a real weirdo, because only a real weirdo would become a muscle man and like go into a career where you just get beaten senseless every night and just have to like tie yourself back together with twine.
Right.
And go out the next night. Right. And there was a moment in that conversation where he was describing that he was like the weird hip hop kid when he was in middle school and high school in his like mostly white school in the late 80s, early 90s. And he was describing his like outfits that he would wear and get picked on. And I was like, well, tell me about them, right? Like, I want to hear about these outfits.
Yeah.
Specifics are the soul of narrative. And he started describing them. And I was like, what? Like Kwame the Boy Wonder, who was a rapper producer who was famous for wearing polka dots. And he goes, I loved Kwame the Boy Wonder. And I was like, this is a guy who was like paying attention to me and everything. Like it's not like he was shining me on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But he's a guarded guy. He lives this like ascetic lifestyle where he teaches himself songs on the piano every time he's in a movie and all his free time from the movie. And I was like, well, here's a funny thing. Kwame the Boy Wonder, He's got a great name.
That's for
He's
sure.
actually a very talented guy, like made great music, but like famous for wearing polka dots, right? And if you notice things like that, even a guarded person, I like asked Tom Hanks what makes him mad because I was like, he's so nice all the
You got to know.
time.
We need that answer.
It was a traffic thing. It was like people honking at him for I can't remember. It was something about traffic.
Okay.
I was like, even this
that
is,
one. I know.
Yeah, you're being cute, Tom Hanks. I get it. You're Tom Hanks.
Playing Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
That's my interview with Jesse Thorn. We like to thank people for coming on our show, and I did, in fact, thank Jesse. Thank you, Jesse. Really appreciate it. And then I thanked him again. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. And one more time. Okay. Thanks a lot, Jesse. Appreciate it. Bye. But Jesse had already stopped recording on his end, so we'll just have to trust that he had an okay time. Bullseye airs on Saturday evenings at 7 on WFIU2. That's 101.9 in Bloomington and 100.1 in Seymour. It's also a podcast, and you can find it in all the same places you listen to Nice Work. Thanks for listening. I'm Alex Chambers, and this is Nice Work. Kismet Literary Magazine. Kismet Magazine. Is that the official name? And you are three of the staff. Could you introduce yourselves?
I'm Matthew Woods. I'm the co-founder and editor-in-chief of the Kismet Magazine. The Kismet Magazine is right. There's now another one that cropped up after we started that also is the same. I know. It's fine. We're not that salty about it.
I'm Bri. I am the other co-founder, and I'm one of the developmental editors.
Let's get back to that. Definitely want to hear more about developmental editing.
Yeah, no, that's a definite selling point that we should talk about more. So I'm Sarah Johnson-LaBarbera, and I am the managing editor and oracle of the magazine.
And oracle.
Yes.
Impressive. Okay, we also need to come back to that.
Self-assigned titles.
I should also say, this is Nice Work, and I'm Alex Chambers. Welcome to Nice Work. Tell me about the origin story.
Okay. This has become my bit. Like when we go to an event, I'm the person that throw at the person to say like, what is Kismet? We were sitting at around a campfire at a friend's house in the hills and hollers of Bloomington, Indiana. Uh-huh. And I'd recently...
Actually, we were doing bad archery.
Well, yeah, we were also shooting a bow and arrow that they happen to have.
Okay.
We were not doing very good at it.
No. And I'd recently been on like a deep dive. And whenever I have some sort of crazy thing that I've been thinking through, I usually turn to Bri to talk through it. And so my deep dive had been, I was looking through literary awards for genre fiction, specifically sci-fi, fantasy, and horror, and looking at what magazines were winning. And I was compiling this list of magazines and looking through what was the landscape currently, because I'd really gotten back into the genre as a whole. But looking through all these different publications, I was like, there's no publication that currently exists that has a framing that is specifically for fiction for better worlds. Very like Adrian Moore Brown, like emergent strategy of like imagining the worlds we want to live in sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so Bri called me. Bri, as often we do, said, we could do that. And I said, yeah, okay, sure, let's do it. And then we're here now.
So it was sort of this speculative fiction that then became a reality?
Yes.
Look like, Sarah, you need to add something to this.
So I was not involved in the origins of it. And I don't think Bri and I knew each other at that point. I had adopted Matt a while ago. And at the time, I was on volunteer staff at Literary Mama, which is a digital publication that publishes a wide variety of literary writing from the perspective and with a view on motherhood. And Matt would come to me with questions about or I'd be like, oh, well, we do it this way. This is how we handle submissions. And I love speculative fiction. And then finally I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to hire myself as your managing editor because nothing is going to happen. Well, it would happen eventually. But I love building a system. I love ordering people around. So I was like, let's do this. So
your goal is to create a space for visionary speculative fiction?
Yeah, I mean, it was sort of twofold, too. So, I mean, there's the first level where we were wanting this world where we wanted, speculative fiction that, says something. But then whenever we were talking in our,
what do you mean by says something?
We all love fiction that sits somewhere between having a conversation about the world as we know it and what's wrong with it and how we grapple with that. And that can also be through the lens of not just science fiction, which I think is often what people think of, but also fantasy does a really great job of this. Things like The Sinless of Sins, Tower of Babel series by Josiah Bancroft is this scathing critique of capitalism through 4 novels, which a Dante's Rings of Hell sort of thing. So says something as in it's engaging with our political landscape and begging questions.
Cool.
The second level was not only that, but it seems like a lot of the writing industry has become so bureaucratic and capital-based. That we also, whenever we were first having our like second meeting after that bonfire, we're like, we want a magazine that's sort of a community as well, that is also its own sort of like reckoning with this like industry. And we want to have discourse and friends and a community through a magazine, which is not something I still don't think exists. And as like tooting our own horn, but I think so frequently magazines become niches to sell a certain type of fiction.
True.
Rather than a place to build out some sort of community.
And I'll say, I think we definitely have a leaning towards pieces that have this kernel of hope. Not that we haven't accepted sort of more dystopian or nihilistic pieces, but definitely the ones that sort of have this hopeful outlook, even in the midst of, misery or darkness, really definitely speak to us. And I think also the community aspect. And those are things that I'm also always trying to push us to tie back to the Midwestern roots of, like, how does that get defined in what we're doing with speculative fiction when we want to accept pieces from everywhere and it's not cordoned off, in a way, but is still somehow Midwestern.
Say more about that. So you're based here in Bloomington. You're trying to both have a sort of a Midwestern, say, sensibility, but you are accepting pieces from wherever.
Whenever we were first dreaming of this, I had this vision. I remember the first time I ever found a zine was in the Wells Library. I was a student, like a sophomore on 7th or 8th floor, had walked past a table and somebody left a zine there. And I picked it up. I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. What is this? And so I wanted, like we had talked about, we wanted to be able to go like throw zines around Bloomington or around Indiana or mail zines to our friends and have them leave them places. So there's a certain like tactile, physical quality to community that we wanted. We're sending them to our friends. We're placing them in locations that are special to us here in Bloomington. But also we didn't want to like limit, like the science fiction, fantasy, horror community is not in Bloomington, or not just in Bloomington. But yeah, so we wanted like this Midwest sensibility too, of sort of like a potluck, I think maybe is a good way to put it, of like bringing as many people together with all their different like odd dishes in whatever space that ends up being. It could be here in Bloomington for an event. It could be in Discord. It could be when we go to like a conference in Florida or wherever. Like we're going to try and bring people together to have a conversation or play board games or, yeah.
So, Bri, as a developmental editor, let's start with you just describing what developmental editing is.
Sure. The way I look at it is we get a lot of pieces that we see a lot of heart in, or we really like the idea, but something about the technical aspect of the writing is kind of holding the rest of it back from being as good as it could be. And I think this actually started because we got a submission from a writer who in their cover letter said, this is the first story that I've submitted for publication. And the descriptions were just so vivid and it was eerie. And I sort of gravitate toward the more horror. So when we're slushing together, like if it's a horror piece that's good, like I will be like, yes, we should take this.
Slushing for people in the non-literary mag world is just reading through submissions.
Yeah, and deciding, we kind of do it all together. We'll get together for a couple hours and we'll each take a bunch and say, we want this. We want it with edits, developmental editing, candidate, and then I look through those and see which ones that I would want to take on. If we're unsure, there's like needs another set of eyes. So, when we were slushing it, I was just like, this is so eerie and so good, but the ending just felt a little anticlimactic. It didn't seem like it tied together what the rest of the story was doing. And so my background is I'm currently a PhD candidate in English literature, and my dissertation is on science fiction and fantasy. So
you know a thing or two.
I know some things, for sure. Someday I'll know a whole lot of things, but yeah. And my background, I did a little bit of like creative writing workshop in undergrad. So I really felt drawn to this piece and drawn to authors who are interested in what our mission is, but who are maybe nervous about sending out their publications for the first time. And I think there is a kind of lack of access to good feedback if you're not in an MFA or if you're not part of a writing circle. So I felt for this writer who was like, this is my first piece, and I don't know much about them, but I was imagining like, well, maybe they don't have someone to give them feedback. And I really like the piece. So I think this would be a little more intensive to give to our regular editors. And I also have pretty strong opinions about what I would want or what I think would make the piece a little bit more cohesive. So I think that was the first piece I took on. And that's when we started talking about the role of a developmental editor.
The idea of offering developmental editing, I think, comes from like a place of like service for us. Like, hey, we have this ability, we have this perspective, and it may not be the best perspective, but it's one that we want to offer if you want it.
All right. Thanks, you guys. This is great. Fascinating. You can read Kismet at thekismetmagazine.com. For Nice Work, I'm Alex Chambers.
For many years, I hosted a food program, Earth Eats. You might have heard of it. And one of the themes that showed up again and again was connection. The way food allows us to connect with one another. Whether it's shared memories over a favorite childhood dish or discovery across cultural differences, food has that connective power. I think that's what art does too. Maybe that's its purpose. Artists create because they have something to say. A thought they wanted to share, an interpretation of world events, a feeling or a personal experience they want others to know about and understand. Not every work of art achieves that desired communication, at least not for every audience member. Suk-Young Augustine's thesis show at the Grunwald Gallery drew that line of connection for me. It's called Invisible Identity, All of the Little Things. It was one of the second-round MFA thesis shows from the Eskenazi School of Art, Architecture, and Design at Indiana University. Arranged like some kind of medical specimens in tall glass jars from another era, placed on top of standard white gallery plinths, Augustine's finely crafted personal adornment objects captured my attention instantly. Visually, the delicately detailed objects suspended in their glass cylinders appealed to me in a tactile way, pleasantly frustrating my desire to handle them. The organic needle-felted wool elements contrasted with the pierced copper and intricate enamel designs. The artist balances the hard and the sharp against the soft, almost plush, and all of it in reds and pinks, yellow gold, colors that feel feminine and pretty, and simultaneously fleshy and grotesque. Suk-Young Augustine's work walks that fine line so beautifully. I was pulled in by the beauty, the evident skill, the exquisite, at times obsessive craft of her work. I noticed that in addition to the title and material placards for each piece was what the artist refers to as symptom cards. Here's an example. Symptom: abdominal pain. 3 uterine cervical samples in 4 years, 1 with pain medication. Subject informed they could return to work the same day, despite using a glorified hole punch to collect cervical tissue. There's just enough text there, just enough story, just enough context to guide me in my looking. When I examine the piece, an intricate locket made of copper, wool, and tiny glass seed beads, I notice the shapes that conjure the action of the hole punch. The response is visceral. Suk-Young Augustine has accomplished the work of an artist. Since I have known several people who suffer from chronic ailments, sometimes without clear diagnoses and certainly without effective treatment, I was moved by Augustine's project. The concept was legible and meaningful to me. As a woman navigating the medical system my whole life, I'm familiar with physicians dismissing or downplaying symptoms and doubting my lived experience. The show makes visible Augustine's lifelong struggle with illness, pain, discomfort, inconclusive testing, and the not unrelated early trauma of being adopted from Korea and raised in a white American household. I'm drawn to work that digs into artists' personal biographies. I know how transformative it can be to grapple with issues like illness and trauma through art making. Rarely does an artist manage to pull this off as well as Suk-young Augustine does in her MFA thesis show. Her work is not literal, it is not didactic, nor is it vague. It's understood in a way that language alone could not accomplish. The communication is legible and clear, in part because it is felt, emotionally and somatically. I'm honored and grateful to have had the chance to witness her project. We have a few images from the show on our website, ipm.org. For Nice Work, I'm Kate Young.
This is Nice Work. I'm Alex Chambers. Relationships with chatbots, with AI, with robots, whatever we want to call them, these are situations we have to face right now. And Jewish Theater of Bloomington will be helping us think through that with their latest production. It's called Your Name Means Dream. It runs May 7th through 17th at the Waldron Rose Fire Bay. And I'm happy to say I have the director, Martha Jacobs, and one of the two actors, Diane Condrat, in the studio to talk with me about it.
Hi.
Hello, Martha and Diane. Great to have you here.
Wonderful to be here.
Let's start with the show itself. Diane, you play Ashlyn. Tell me about her character.
Oh, she's a lovely woman. That's what she would want you to believe. She's actually a bitter, isolated, vulgar alcoholic living in Queens for far too long by herself.
And what is the situation then? Maybe, Martha, you could jump in here, that she faces.
Diane is being way too hard on her character. So Ashlyn is fully human, by which I mean she's all those things, all those flaws and problems, but she's also deeply sensitive, deeply vulnerable, and lovable at the same time as she's kind of, you want to keep her at a distance. So I would call that a full human being. And her partner in this play is an AI robot hired to take care of her. And she's played by the amazing Valerie Kilmer.
So my sense is that Ashlyn has refused help from every other person.
Oh, she's happy to have help. They just quit.
Okay.
A line from the show is 5 ladies quit on me in the last year. So she has a son who is financially supporting her, but really doesn't want to see too much of her. And so he arranges a robot to come and be her caregiver.
What was the thought process in choosing this play?
Well, that was not my choice. Audrey Heller chooses the plays.
Okay.
Yeah. But the reason I like it is...
I'll take that.
Yeah, is because of all of these questions. And I think a lot about the body, right? Because for me, as human beings, I think most of what I've learned in life, I've learned through my body, through senses and smells and tastes and pain. And I think that the path to wisdom is you can't get wise unless you learn empathy. And I don't think you can learn empathy until you experience pain.
It seems then that the Valerie's character, does she end up experiencing pain?
Of the important kind, I would say yes. Yeah. Wouldn't you say?
Yes.
Yeah.
And how that happens will leave for people to experience when they come see it. Your Name Means Dream is the latest production by Jewish Theater of Bloomington. It runs May 7th through 17th at the Waldron Rose Fire Bay. You can find more information at jewishtheaterbloomington.com. That's theater with an R-E. For Nice Work, I'm Alex Chambers.
Thank you, Alex.
All right. Thank you both. So great to see
Thanks
you.
very much.
You've been listening to Nice Work, a production of WFIU, WTIU, and Indiana Public Media. Find us at ipm.org.
Kate Young, Alex Chambers, and me, Tyler Lake, produce the show, and we get production help from Danny William, Carl Templeton, Jillian Blackburn, and Jonah Ballard.
A huge thank you and farewell to Leo Pies and Holly Wilkerson. Wishing you all the best in your future endeavors.
Our theme music was composed and performed by Alan Davis. Additional music from Universal Production Music. The executive producer is Eric Bolstridge. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Nice work, Tyler.
Hey, nice work, Kate.